All right, so the first show I want to talk about debuted in 1983, which would have been 40 years ago.
No, Brian, like that 20 years ago.
No, 40 years ago.
No, Brian.
1303,
No,
93,
Brian,
83.
Brian. It was not 40 years ago, Brian.
No, no.
No, that was like yesterday. Get it right. Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, where we don't have to be Adam Goldberg to revisit the 80s. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Beth.
And, if you've been alive in the last 20 years, you've seen this infatuation with the 1980s. Well, this is your episode. Guys, this is for you. We brought in our special guest, Beth, to talk to us about what are some of the great shows from the 1980s. And you know what I realized? I didn't watch a lot of 80s shows. I'm going through these, I'm like, I vaguely remember these, but it's been a while. I don't know how you guys are.
Well, I'll go ahead, Beth.
These are very fresh in my mind. I have never stopped watching these. These are arguably some of the greatest TV of all time. I would like to put out there, and I am passionate about this decade of television.
That's a bold claim,
and that's why you were actually our first call for the 80s guests. You weren't the backup. You're the first call we had for the 80s.
Good to know.
There are a few shows in the 80s that I got that I also really love a lot. But for me, because I was born in 88, at the end of the 80s, these are shows that I watched more so like on Nick at Night and TV Land in reruns. I don't know if I actually watched any of these. I think I did watch any of these in their first original run.
And that's why, like, the 1960s decade that we did was so good for me, because I'm like, TV Land, I would watch that all the time. And all these, like, 1960s shows, I'm like, I love it. And then 80s was like, nah, come on. But with the audacious claim that Beth has made, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'm going to ask you, what was the best? I'm not saving it for last. We're going to start with the best 1980s show. It's hard, but what would you say is the number one?
I know my answer.
So I'm not going to say a particular TV show. Okay. I'm going to give that award to 80s TV theme songs overall.
That is true.
Because arguably these went harder. Mm-hmm. They are far superior to any TV themes. Theme songs today barely even have words at all. Yeah, they have beautiful graphics, no words. Back then, they told you a story. They pulled you in. They gave a little intro to the characters. Sometimes, it was the decade for TV theme songs.
I think some of that bled into the 90s, but I think especially when you get to the late 90s, then TV theme songs really started to die down. But I think 80s into early 90s is a prime time for TV theme songs. In fact, we'll get to it when we talk about the show. My all-time favorite TV theme song is from the 80s. Hands down, no question.
See, now, apparently we're fighting today, Beth. I didn't know this. I wasn't prepared coming into this, because I'm going to throw back, like, best decade for TV theme songs. To me, that's the 60s, with Flintstones, Gilligan's Island, Brady Bunch. I guess Brady Bunch was the 70s, but, like, to me, I think of classic television theme songs, and I go back to the 60s. But
fair enough. But I mean, the shows that used to air on ABC Friday, TGIF shows, The Perfect Strangers, Family Matters, and let's not forget the Saturday morning cartoons, the Chippendales Rescue Rangers, Gummy Bears. I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but that song might be my favorite cartoon theme song.
Okay.
Darkwing Duck. Like, there was some brilliant cartoon theme songs that are some of my favorite. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I would give you best of the 80s, to me, is DuckTales.
Yes. I'll give you that.
Or Muppet Babies. And not just because I love Muppets, because that theme song went hard.
It's a good
song. With that one like high-pitched one that went...
Yep.
That's it. And that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Well, let's start with some great TV. I'm going to try and pick something that's going to be on multiple ones of our lists, and I want to save one of these. Let's start with Growing Pains, because a show that can have Leonardo DiCaprio and Kirk Cameron and Alan Thicke all together at a table and like having lines together, like what a weird to see the trajectory of their careers is crazy now, like 30 years late, 40 years later. But what did you guys watch Growing Pains? What was some of your favorite parts of that? Who would you like about it?
I don't remember any specific episodes. I do remember watching it, and I think this was kind of like the prototype of like that '80s family sitcom. Obviously, you got, I think Alan Thicke is one of like the greatest TV dads. Kind of gave Kirk Cameron, before Kirk Cameron became what Kirk Cameron is today, love him or hate him, which seems to be everyone has one of those opinions on him.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean that's all I really remember specifically about Growing Pains.
mm-hmm.
Ironically enough, I was not allowed to watch Growing Pains.
Really?
Again, knowing what Kirk Cameron has grown into. Yes, I
was
was
it
told
racy?
as a child. I think they just felt like when it came out, there were more teenage situations, and it was like early to mid 80s. So I was under 10 years old. So it just was not a show I was allowed to watch. And it wasn't one that I ever went back and watched in reruns because I wasn't a huge Kirk Cameron fan. So
Sure.
I think the only scene that I really remember of Growing Pains is when Matthew Perry died.
I don't remember that at all. I don't remember Matthew Perry being on there.
He was a friend of the sister on that show, and then he, ironically, I think he died of some drug overdose or something like that, which for Matthew Perry's personal life is ironic. But it was like one of like the big emotional moments of the show. That's really, because I've only seen it because that's one of those clips, kind of like the Fresh Prince, "Why Didn't You Want Me?" like clips that keeps getting replayed all the time.
Sure. I remember that Mike, I know that the show was very PG, especially if you compare it to now, but that they did give Mike's character some more adult situations in just like the alluded to sort of thing, where it's like, he's a horn dog teenager, and that's a lot of his characteristics, which is really funny that it's played by Kirk Cameron.
Yeah. Well, even like Full House, I remember thinking like Full House was so PG. If you look at the early episodes, Uncle Jesse was pretty much talking about sex every time he was on screen the first couple episodes.
Well, that's John Stamos. That was in his contract.
Yeah, but then I think later on they fell more into PG. So maybe that was the same thing with Growing Pains, whereas like PG in our memory, but it maybe got like tamely racy at different times. I don't know.
All right, because Beth brought this up, I want to, with any of our shows, before we move on, I want to give the theme song a grade. So let's start with the Growing Pains theme song. Grade it. Brian, what do you got?
I'm trying to remember which one is the Growing Pains theme song.
Don't waste another minute on your crying.
Oh yeah, that one's a great one. I'd say that one gets a 7.
So I was going A's to F's, but yes, we can do 1 to 10. That's fine. I think
that would be a C.
Right at it. I'd put it at like maybe. At the time, it was an 8, and I think it gets bumped down to a 6 now. I don't think it had the lasting effect, but it was good for its time. So I don't know what that puts it at. Maybe it's the 7 because the 6 and 8 average together.
Oof. I mean, even though I didn't watch the show, great theme song. I'd give it a 7.
Look at that. Just across the board, we know.
I'm basically giving it a 7 because I need to give room for other ones to be higher.
All right, Beth, why don't you go ahead and pick the next show to talk about?
I mean, I might be a little biased, but Cheers.
Cheers is my favorite.
I feel like
far.
that should be on most people's top 10 list of best 80 shows, if not best show of all times top 10 lists. It was an incredible cast, had a very solid theme song, represented arguably the greatest city in the world, had
She's from Boston.
just all of the character tropes you'd hope to see, the will they, won't they, the slightly dim-witted character in Coach, and that, yeah, I'm from Boston, in Coach, and then Woody. It wasn't a big set. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was character driven. It was funny. It was warm. How could you not love Cheers?
So here's one thing. Matt has only seen, unless it's changed, you've only seen one episode of Cheers because I gave him an episode to watch for this podcast, whereas I've seen the whole thing multiple times. I watched it on Nick at Night and fell in love with it, and I've watched it on Netflix. I'm a huge Cheers fan. And even to think, okay, Frasier was a side note character,
Hmm.
like basically the equivalent of like Roy from The Office. And not only did he stay on the show even after Diane left, but then he got his own spin-off that lasted another 10 years, just showing the power of this show that could
And now
launch
he's getting a
that.
reboot of that spinoff coming to Paramount Plus this fall.
Yeah, and all that started when he was a
Yep.
supporting character from 40 years ago that was only supposed to be in a few episodes. That's just insane.
Yeah.
But no, Cheers is one of those shows where like you only need them to be in that one spot. You have the employees of the bar, and then you have Norman Cliff, and that's all. I mean, and just them sitting around the bar talking is really all you need for a great show. I said, like Beth was saying, all the different characters mingling, all of Norm's one-liners, all Cliff being like the know-it-all who is like the sad sack who you are actually okay with making fun of him, and Carly being mean to everybody, and just
Yeah.
I can't recommend this show enough.
And I know that I've only watched the one episode, but I definitely can speak to the talent of the cast because I mean that is such an amazing cast. Like Ted Danson is great, Woody Harrelson is great. I love John Ratzenberger probably because of Pixar, honestly.
Yeah.
But I always liked when George Wendt would come on any other show that I'd see him. George Wendt is one of those character actors that you see pop up and you're like, this guy's great. I like to see him. So lots of good talent in that show for sure. And to me, I put the theme song at a 9. It's as close as you can get to a 10 without being a perfect 10.
Okay, Beth, what did you rate the theme song of Cheers?
I'd agree. Oh, I'd give it a
Out
9.
of 10, out of 10, I would give it a 20. It's my all-time favorite TV theme song. That's what I was talking about. Nothing will ever beat it, especially the full version with the saxophone solo.
Respect. Like I can't argue with someone who's like, this is the best theme song of all time because it's really good.
It is, yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Brian, why don't you take a shot with this show?
Okay, well, I mean, Cheers probably would have been the first one I bring up, and so next one, okay, this is one of those shows that forever has an asterisk now. You know what I'm talking about. But the show itself was amazing, and that is The Cosby Show.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cosby Show is so funny, and like the teenage characters are fine, but it really like to me was between Cliff, Claire, and Theo. Those three, like I loved their storylines, and I loved to see them, especially between Cliff and Theo. Like it's so relatable as a dad now to see how he acts with his son, and it's like his son you can see is smart. Theo has some intelligence, like book smarts, but he does really well in playing the street smart stupid version. Like he's not a dumb character, but he's a teenage boy. And so he makes dumb teenage boy decisions all the time. And Cliff has to just sit there like, who are you? And so like him having fun, like teasing his own son is a blast to see, but he also has like that he clearly cares about his kids. He clearly cares about his family. He clearly is a great dad in the show. And it was such a refreshing show to have, to like not only be such a great family show, but to show like this black family that it's not like there's no like their race didn't really come into it. They were just an everyday family that happened to be black. And I think that was really great in terms of representation for the black community in that time.
Yeah. And I think great with Cliff and Claire is it's very rare. I don't know if it ever happened where Cliff actually had to raise his voice and yell at his kids because Claire was the yeller. And she kind of got to be like the deadpan, like he got to be the deadpan, like, well, you're an idiot because of this, so, but he never got angry, even though like they were clearly on a team. He wasn't like push over letting his kids get away with everything, but they just work so well together in their dynamic. And like one of the best episodes, which is again weird to think about now considering the Cosby history, is the whole one where Theo was planning a bachelor party for Denise's husband, and the whole thing about do we have strippers or not, and then they came into a whole big fight throughout that episode. That even talks about like, oh, the grandpa, Cliff's dad, had some kind of stripper at his bachelor party, and all the women are getting mad, and it's just, and they're serving chicken, and they're getting mad at each other, like, what do you want, a breast or a leg? And he's like, give me a wing, because that's the safe option.
See, for me, I always preferred the episodes that featured the younger kids. So, like earlier today, I was actually watching the clips from when they did I think it was the anniversary of the grandparents, and Rudy would come down and lip sync.
Oh yeah, they did
Like,
that. I think they did that twice, didn't they?
yeah, they did. Um, but I just always loved Rudy and all her little friends. And
Mhm.
then it was Raven Simone who
Raven.
joined the cast and her little
Yeah.
friends. And I just thought they were like a cute, almost like separate show within a show.
Yeah, it almost started the trope of, oh, our cute little kid's getting too old. We need to get
Mm,
a new, cuter, younger kid to fill that void.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Rudy was actually supposed to be a boy when they first had started that, from what I can remember reading. And then
Hmm.
when the actress auditioned for the role, they're like, "Oh, we need to put her in." They changed her to be a girl to fit this young actress.
I think it'd fit to have Theo be the only boy, though, too.
Yeah, like you could absolutely see there being like a big brother dynamic that they could have gone with, but what they still ended up with worked well too.
Yeah.
Because all that of especially for him being oldest, all of that attention of like him trying to impress girls and be cooler than he is in front of all of his sisters who know who he is,
Hmm.
and like that dynamic was really good.
Actually, Theo was the middle.
Oh, was he? Oh, that's
Yeah, it
right.
was
Sandra was
Sandra,
the oldest.
Denise,
Thank you.
Sandra, Denise, Theo, then Vanessa and Rudy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just like he steals scenes from me
Yeah.
from the girls, in my opinion. So
Mm.
that's
Well, the
why I
older
kept
two
it
girls
up.
weren't on it as much as the younger ones were.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
All
as
right.
far as the Cosby Show theme song, it's weird because it's a different one every season, but it's like the same basic melody, just in different styles.
Hmm.
So I would give it like a 6 because it's good, but I prefer a consistent theme song.
I don't remember it, so I can't rate it. So I'm gonna give it an A.
Yeah, it didn't have words; it was just a melody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember it. I think I'd agree with your 6, but I think the creativity of having the idea to change it season over season, and I remember waiting for the season premiere to see what that opening would look like visually, because as the kids grew, it was more important to see what it was going to look like year over year. So
Hmm.
I'd almost give the visual for the theme more points than the audio.
That's fair.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to bring up a show that I don't think is on either of your lists. And I know, Brian, you don't have too much from this show. I don't know about you, Beth, but I don't think that this is for you. But I love from this era, I loved the reboot of Star Trek The Next Generation, the introduction of Jean Luc Picard, the introduction of Jonathan Frakes into the Star Trek universe, who, like, Jonathan Frakes as Riker, like he's done more for the Star Trek universe than so many other people because he's constantly directing episodes of all these other Star Trek spin-offs, and he's constantly appearing in everything from Star Trek Picard, of course, to the Lower Decks show, to Enterprise, who's on the season or series finale of that. Like he is everywhere in the Star Trek universe because he is just so inundated with it. And like this was I love the original cast. I think there's strength in some of the other casts, but I feel like every single cast member of Star Trek: The Next Generation was on point, except for Yasha Tar after the first season, who died like right away, and they replaced her.
Tasha
But
Yar.
like the main, yeah. Did I say Yasha
You
Tar?
did, which was pretty amazing.
I did. I'm really good at messing up in terrible ways. Thank you. So you do know.
Uh,
So Beth,
yes.
talk to me about Star Trek.
Oh, I talk about two things on my TikTok channel, the Muppets and Star Trek. I am an avid Star Trek fan. I feel very strongly about The Next Generation. It was number 3 on my list. I remember where I was when that show premiered, where I sat, what our living room looked like. It was such a big deal in our house, and it was the technology for the time was groundbreaking. I will say I have gone back and tried to do a rewatch, and I'm Picard's probably my favorite captain of all the Star Trek captains. I totally agree. Riker, as much as I love Jonathan Frakes, I completely agree with everything you're saying and his involvement. I just finished, season 2 of Strange New Worlds, and I know he directed a lot of that. But his character, does it hold up? necessarily. I mean, as much as like James T. Kirk holds up in that kind of like
Yeah,
smarmy man way, women chasing way that they
that's
do.
true.
But no, Data is one of my favorite. One of my big complaints about Star Trek in general, not enough droids, and Data is really one of the only that we can look to have any kind of, you know, droid interaction. Um,
Yeah, and I get with like Star Trek Picard of explaining away like why we don't have more synths, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I buy it, but I mean, we could do more, and you could have better, and I think that would be good to see. I guess maybe not in Star Trek New Strange New Worlds because that's before synthezoids, but like I'm with you that we should have more because the exploration of what made Data human was some of the best storylines in Star Trek.
yes,
Period.
yes, 100% agree. And how they called back to it in that last season of Picard with the cat. Too much, too much. I've shed many a tear over that season and thinking
What do you
about.
think, Brian?
Okay, apologies to both of you and to Wilbur wherever he is. I have still never seen any piece of Star Trek media. I've never seen any of the shows or movies, anything. And at this point, I think I'm not going to until we eventually do a podcast about Star Trek, and then I'll have to watch some stuff for that.
We'll watch the
Which is
best of
why,
both worlds.
which is why I've been quiet on this.
Fair enough.
But I will also say the theme song for
Mhm.
Next Generation is a 10 out of 10.
I'll give it a 9. It's very good.
Okay, well,
It's very, very good especially for a Star Trek theme. It's probably the best Star Trek theme.
Well,
what if I just
easily
act like a
to me.
jerk and give it a 1 to throw off the average?
Well,
You,
that's fine. You don't count. So, all right, Beth, navigate us to something else. Engage.
um, I have so many on here. Anyone have Murphy Brown on their list?
I don't.
I don't, but go ahead.
Are either of you familiar with Murphy Brown at all?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I never watched any, but I'm familiar with the concept.
I mean, it was really a vehicle for Candice Bergen, who is brilliant in absolutely everything she does. And again, similar to Cheers, in that, you know, everybody was it was an ensemble cast. Everybody played a very specific role. It took place in a newsroom. It was really at a time when news was starting to play a bigger role, I think, in society. You know, we had pretty much just been network news, and this whole cable news was really blossoming, I think, in the late 80s. And this was an opportunity to explore that a little bit and explore it from a pretty level-headed, presenting both sides kind of way, not in a particularly biased in one way. They did a good job of presenting arguments on both sides. It was a comedy with a little bit of brain, a little bit of heart, really just everything you were looking for in a sitcom. I believe it was a Monday night sitcom.
I like that when they actually can show both sides of a thing where there are some shows that really seem so much like it's almost like a political agenda.
Yeah.
But so if you can stay out of that, that'd be good.
This, as I recall, seemed to be a little bit more unbiased in that way. But again, anything with Candice Bergen, I just think she's brilliant.
And Candice Bergen, she's the daughter of Edgar Bergen, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I do find it funny. I know that this debuted in '88 and Growing
So did
Pains
I.
in '85. Yeah. But like that, you were able to watch Murphy Brown, but not watch Growing Pains because that's to me a lot more adult. From what I understand about the show, I guess I've never seen it, so I don't know for sure.
You're right, but I think like my family, I'm sure someone has Golden Girls on their list. I remember I was allowed to watch Golden Girls up to a point, and then it got too racy. And I think the cutoff for my parents was sex. So anything that was showing relationships or sex, and there wasn't a lot of that in Murphy Brown. It may have been more adult themed, but it wasn't adult themed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Plus, for me, there's a lot of stuff that I watched but didn't tell my parents I was watching.
Brian, first that, and now a tattoo.
Yeah.
All right, Tattoo Boy, what do you got on your list?
Well, and again, this is I'm pretty sure Beth will have something to talk about this. I'm not sure about you, Matt, but when it comes to the Henson world, the '80s was the time of Fraggle Rock.
Yep.
So, Matt, have you seen any Fraggle Rock? Do you know about the show?
I think I did as a kid. I don't remember like any of it. I know that like before you get into Fraggle Rock, I do want to like highlight. I think that that's awesome. Like because '70s was like the inception. Well, maybe not like '60s inception of the Muppets, but like '70s was like growing that like the power of the Muppets, so to speak. And '80s was like well, let's get weird with it. Let's do what we can. Let's see. Like I love that experimental phase of the '80s, and I think maybe Fraggle Rock is one of the things that exemplifies it the best. Oh, maybe Dark Crystal exemplifies it the best. But.
Well, he's interesting with like the okay. Real quick, give me 2 seconds. I got to show you guys something.
Okay. He has a whole song and dance prepared. He's going to go get ready.
I wouldn't be surprised.
If I hear music start playing, I'm leaving.
Okay, this was back like 10, 15 years ago before streaming was everything. I got into Fraggle Rock late because I was always more like, yeah, I like the Muppets and Sesame Street characters, but I didn't really know much about them. When I first got into them, what I had to do was buy the complete box set DVD of Fraggle Rock,
Wow, that's impressive.
and that's how I watched it. And
How did you think that reveal was going to go, Brian? I just wanted to know.
I wasn't expecting a wow, but I thought it would still be good to show. If I thought of it, I would have had it here already. But just looking at like what Jim Henson had in his mind when he was creating the show is, I mean, this was his tagline was, I wanted to create a show to promote world peace, which sounds a lot, but like that's kind of like the message they wanted to promote with the show is like how you give all the different species, the Fraggles, the Doozers, and the Gorgs, and how like they all work together in this ecosystem and how they learn to, be with each other. And you have like the Doc and Sprocket and Uncle Traveling Matt like exploring the human world. And it just, when you look at it from that lens, it really is like was a big undertaking in what they wanted to promote for that show. And another thing is that interesting is that Jim Henson kind of created it as a show that he could just set up and leave, because he doesn't perform any of the major characters. He has a couple recurring characters. So basically, he would set up the show. He would come in every now and then to perform a character or direct, and then just leave. And he'd leave the rest of his performers and directors to kind of keep that machine running, which is kind of a great way to do it, because basically he keeps money coming in for the Henson productions, gets a good show going, but he doesn't have to be hands-on every day running it, which is just the cool behind-the-scenes aspect of it.
Didn't he kind of do that with Labyrinth and like put who's the performer who did Elmo? I thought I remember saw like in the documentary that like that performer really took over Labyrinth and was like kind of the guy with that, or am I misremembering?
I don't know. That would have been Kevin Clash at the time. I don't know. Could be.
Okay. I thought I remembered in the documentary that was like Kevin was like Jim was like, hey, Kevin, you take the lead on this one, and you kind of show these performers what Henson performing is about.
It could. I don't really know a whole lot about the Labyrinth and like Dark Crystal side of the Henson world, but I do know with Fraggle Rock and even like the main characters, they all are so differently unique. You have like Gobo's a leader, and Boober is like the cautious one who just loves to stay out of danger and do laundry, and then Red is the excitable one. It's like they all have their own unique personalities and gel, and because of that, you can take any two of those characters, mix them together, and you have an interesting story there.
Mm-hmm. Also, could that be the largest puppet in the Henson world in the trash heap?
Ooh, that could be. Do you know about the trash heap, Matt?
I don't know.
Their all-knowing oracle is literally Marjorie the trash heap, and it's literally just a giant pile of trash that becomes alive and gives them saved wisdom.
Yep. Yeah, that tracks. At no point in that sentence did I know where the sentence was going to end up.
Performed by the brilliant late Jerry Nelson.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like to give these guys shout-outs when I can.
Yeah. I mean, the names. Like, you're not going to, like, I think that's what his name is. Like, no. Yeah, you know it.
Of course I know the names.
So
I know names, too, like Yasha Tar.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I was reading a list the other day of, like, top 10 Canadian shows of all time. And Fraggle Rock was on the list, and I thought it was interesting that they identified it as a Canadian show, but apparently it was a production of, I think it was done in the UK, It
was filmed in Canada.
Okay, it was filmed in Canada. So Canadians are claiming it as their own.
Well, and Gobo Fraggle kind of has a bit of a Canadian accent. He says "a" all the time. Hey,
Oh, I've never
going
noticed
here,
that.
eh? Yeah, but the three major Jim Henson shows were all filmed in different countries. Because Sesame Street was filmed in the U.S., the Muppet Show was filmed in England, and Fraggle Rock was filmed in Canada.
I didn't watch Fraggle Rock, but I watched the knockoff version of it called Eureka's Castle. Did you
Oh,
ever see any of that, Brian?
yeah, I remember Eureka's Castle. There was a bat and a girl and a
Yes.
third one.
A nearsighted bat that would constantly like crash into the walls and would fly, and that was the funniest thing to like a 4-year-old kid at the time.
You know what's
I'm
scarier
sure
than
if
that?
like when
A real
what?
bat in your house that I had last week.
Oh yeah, just like that one. I'm
Like,
sure if I went back and watched it, I'd be like, yeah, this is very much a kid's show. But so that's I don't need to talk long about Eureka's Castle,
yeah.
and that's even more of a '90s show because Eureka's Castle debuted in 1989. Well, it wasn't even that long of a season. It was on in 1989, and that was it. And then it would like restream on Nickelodeon a little bit. So
Mm-hmm. I don't really have any shows that started in like 80, 89. Like I don't have like Family Matters or Seinfeld because they're like those are more 90s because even though they started technically at the very end of the 80s.
yeah, I do have one that I'm still going to call an '80s show. It started in '89. I have a number of them, like Cops, on here. It started in 1989, and love it or hate it, that was a push forward in reality TV.
Yep.
Like we have reality TV today because of Cops and because of Survivor. But anyway, so the 1980s show that I want to talk about that debuted in
Real quick,
'89.
before the Fraggle Rock theme song gets a 9.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I'd agree. I'd give it a 9.
Is Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap was the show for, like that I loved as a kid, like because I had such good connotations with it because like I would watch it with my parents, and that was like one of the first shows because they would tape it and they would watch it together, and I didn't always really understand what was happening, but then Al would walk through the wall and I'd be like, "That's so cool! I love this!" And then like now I'm watching the reboot they just did last year, and I'm like, they get the feel of it, but it's a little too modernized for me. It's like it's a hard line because Quantum Leap was kind of schmaltzy, and it kind of needs to be, but I feel like they can't. It's so hard to have a genuine like schmaltzy type of show nowadays, and that's why I'm so impressed with Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because that does have like that classic Star Trek feel in a modern audience. I'm like, how do you guys do this? Because that's super impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved old Quantum Leap, and I love Scott Bakula. He is such a great TV actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, isn't Quantum Leap kind of like it kind of set the stage for a lot of like mystery shows going forward?
There were a good amount of like mystery show. Oh, do you mean like mystery shows like Lost?
Yeah, like kind of in that same vein.
It wasn't so much of a mystery show. There was like the running thorough line of Sam Beckett needs to get back home, and he's leaping all these different times to try and get back home. But there really wasn't too much mystery that I remember of like, you know, because we never saw in this Quantum Leap reboot. We see the people like working behind the scenes for him. We never saw that I remembered in the original show. And so it was really more focused on the one at a time. It was very episodic and a serial show instead of just, you know, any continuing arc at all.
Yeah. That I didn't watch a ton of it, but that's how I remember it for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Beth, give us another great show.
I don't know how anyone hasn't brought this up yet. This is upsetting. Alf.
Okay. It's on my list.
It better be, because it has a puppet, which, I mean, ticks a box right there. But it's got, you know, made up science fiction, a normal family, you know, you had wacky neighbors, you had that, like, always trying to keep him hidden kind of thing, make sure he doesn't get out. It almost... I would love to hear Roger from American Dad's take on Alf, because I feel like they live kind of similar lives in that way. He was perfect. He burped. He ate cats. Like what? There was nothing wrong with Alf.
As a cat owner, I don't love that he ate cats.
That's a strange list to make perfect. I'm going on the dating scene and I'm looking for that perfect mate. They better burp and eat cats.
I'm allergic to cats, so
I
I'm
am too.
I'm fine with
Which
them
is
being
why
injected.
we don't record at my house very often when Matt's in town. We should go to his hotel.
Listen, the Egyptians worship cats, and the Bible says, "You shall not have any other gods before me."
There
So,
you go.
it's in the Bible. Cats are evil,
Okay, then.
clearly. I'm sorry to all you cat lovers out there, but I'm not really all that sorry. So, if you have a hate mail, send it to Brian.
Well, I like dogs too. I just got a puppy.
It's
You
adorable.
did.
Yeah,
We had a
Congrats.
puppy a couple months ago too.
thank
We're
you.
puppy pals.
There you go. Um, I don't know if this is true or this is a rumor, but wasn't it came out that the guy who performed Alf was kind of a jerk in real life, or is that something I've heard? Just a rumor.
I don't know. I don't know much about the guy who performed them.
I don't know, but that was interesting because it's one of those things where, kind of like a Scooby Doo in the Scooby Doo movies, where it's like he's like the main stars are like the humans, but really you're going to watch Alf, you're going to watch
Yeah.
Scooby Doo. It's like he's the star without being the star, kind of a thing.
He's got all these great one-liners, and
Mhm.
Alf, the personality of Alf was tremendous, and it of course made him a phenomenon. That you have a different personality in there, the show doesn't work. And Alf just being that everyday sort of guy, like that sarcastic, goofy, silly, this normal family. Like he was Urkel before Urkel, but not annoying.
Yeah.
So
When puppet characters can just get away with stuff that other
Sure.
characters can't. Like even I don't think they probably wouldn't have done this in 2023, but like in the 80s Muppets, Animal would just yell woman and chase women around.
True.
Anyway, of course, when
I
it's
only stopped doing that like a year and a half ago.
well, that's concerning because you've been married for 10 years.
Well, I mean, it's only the one woman, but
Okay, well that's
she was
different.
eventually like, Matt, you need to be done. It was cute when we were dating, but that was too much.
But that's the kind of thing with like Alf. Like I don't remember any specific scenes, but I know like it's kind of thing where you can have him say racy or even like offensive stuff, and it's like, oh, it's cute because it's Alf. But if a human said it, they'd be like, oh,
You
on the
don't
10 o'clock
remember a
news.
specific scene? Do you remember how it ends? The TV show ends with Alf getting captured by the government that he's trying to hide from, and he's probably just getting tested on and dissected. Like, it is one of when you think about the implications of it, it's probably one of the worst finales for any character. Like, this beloved guy that we all love, he's in a government facility, locked down as a prisoner. Poor guy.
I did
So
not
for
know
every
that.
ET that gets away, there's an Alf that doesn't.
Yes. That's true.
Yeah.
It's in terms of dark endings for happy characters, I can't think of anything else apart from the show Dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas it's the Ice Age. That's how the show ends. I'm like, what? Why is this how you're choosing to end the show?
That whole show is pretty dark. There was a lot of subversive things in there, intentionally.
But this shouldn't surprise you. But the guy we talked, Kevin Clash, Elmo, was also the baby in Dinosaurs.
Oh, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. You learn something new every day. That was Beth's pick, so we can move to Brian.
Okay. Well, Beth mentioned it earlier, but I think you have to mention Golden Girls.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Because like on paper, you make it be like you want to hit a bunch of different demographics. So like they kind of took a risk saying, let's make a show only about 4 elderly women. Like on paper, that wouldn't be a show like, oh, I'm going to get all the young people to watch old ladies. Like, but it worked. Against the odds, it worked.
It did. And let's also remember people were tuning in because of some of the actresses. Like Betty White is one of the most beloved humans of all time. And
even then, she was known from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then later on became known for Golden Girls.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, she'd been in business for decades.
Yes.
So I think people were tuning in for the women who just happened to be older. Although the most upsetting thing today, I don't know if you've ever seen, like when they list their ages and how old they were when they started in their show and how many of them were in their 50s. And as someone who's getting close to being in their 50s, to even think that I'm nearing Golden Girls age. I'm
Well,
not
I saw a thing
comfortable
where
with
it's
that.
also the styles, where like they took a
Yes.
photo of I think it was Jennifer Lopez and then one of the Golden Girls who at the same age as the pictures, and they swapped their
Ugh,
haircuts,
yeah.
and one got younger and then Jennifer Lopez got older looking,
Yeah.
because they definitely had not the youngest haircuts, I will say.
No. No.
And I think as of now they're all dead, right? Betty White was the
Mm,
last one.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so.
I know Reba Clanahan, B. Arthur, Estelle Getty, they're all dead, yeah.
Yep.
That's right, I know all their names.
Well, good. I couldn't remember Estelle Getty's, but I knew the other three. I know stuff. I only remember B. Arthur's name because of the movie Airheads, where one of their ransom demands. So the Airheads, this movie with Brandon Fraser leading
Hmm.
this rock group of Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler, and they take over a radio station to make them play their hit single, and that's all that they want for the demands. But in order to keep the police busy outside while they're trying to figure out what they're doing, they give them this bogus list of demands, and like one of them is like a football helmet filled with cottage cheese. Another one is naked pictures of B. Arthur. And so that's the they're like, how are we going to get this? That's the only reason I remember that name. For I don't know why.
That's upsetting.
So they
Interesting.
just telling it like it is. Oh, Matt, I don't think I can hang out with you anymore. Oh, thanks, Beth.
But I mean, shows that have stood the test of time, shows that still have a cult following, shows that people are
Mhm.
still absolutely obsessed with. I saw a TikTok video this morning where someone was thrifting a set of Golden Girls mugs they had found at like the Salvation Army, and they were so excited
Mhm.
about it. And, to go back 40 years and tell folks of that time, listen, this show is going to be a big deal for a long time. That's
Yeah.
that's definitely one that's held up.
And then they tried to recreate I think they were trying to recreate the feel of Golden Girls by even getting Betty White again for Hot in Cleveland, but that show
Mm,
was hot garbage.
yeah.
It was hot in Cleveland garbage.
Yep.
All right. Well, was that Beth's pick or was that Brian?
That
Oh,
was
by
That's
the
fine.
way, what is the theme song to Golden Girls? I remember it.
Thank you for being a friend.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a friend. Yep. I put it at a 5, honestly, because it's like I can barely like remember it in my head, and it's not an earworm to me.
Oh,
I'll give it a 6.5.
it gets a 9. That's a classic.
Just the anger, like I don't want to come back on this show if you're gonna mock Golden Girls theme
I
song.
mean,
All right,
We can't alienate her too much because Beth's the only one who could match my Muppet energy.
it's true.
that's true. I can keep up. Like I guess matching
What?
is a far cry, but I can keep up.
Well, yeah, you are. Yeah, I definitely. You're definitely just a couple notches below, but not far off.
That's what I was going for. A couple notches below on the Muppet meter. All right. Well, here's to me probably one of my favorite shows. I think Cosby Show would be my number one from this era, and they're very different shows, so it's hard to compare Star Trek with this. But I think number 2 is going to go to one of these shows, and it's The Wonder Years is the other show.
Mm,
Yeah.
I loved the Wonder
Yep.
Years. I came into watching that show a little young, but it was on like rewind. What a what a what is the word? I just completely forgot.
reruns?
Reruns. That's the one. Gosh, I'm dumb sometimes.
What's a rerun?
You'll find out when you're older. I would watch this on reruns, and I'd watch it probably when I was around 10ish, and that was a solid age, maybe just a little young to completely understand like all the young love stuff, but it was at a close enough age that I could get a little bit of that, like, yeah, I know what it like. I can understand having a feelings for this girl and like
Hmm.
pining after her, and love being super hard, but also love being super simple, and like I can understand the concepts here, and like there was the first I think that I had felt watching what I was kind of starting to understand and believe on screen. And that to me is I think why Wonder Years was so big in my life, or at least at the time, it was great to watch this budding love interest that, to me, gets made better when we watch the spiritual successor of Boy Meets World, in my opinion. But it's it's
The
that
other
same
Savage
show with
brother.
two brothers. But I loved Wonder Years.
Was
I
Ben Savage ever in Wonder Years? Because I know
He
Fred Savage
was.
was in Boy Meets World.
yeah,
Yep.
as a
He there was like on the Valentine's Day episode, when they come together, then Ben Savage is like a little tiny Cupid kid and he shoots like a heart arrow
Okay,
at him.
that's cool.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Beth?
well, I was going to say Fred Savage's character on Boy Meets World was very awful. He was
Yeah.
that terrible.
That was one of the
Fantastic.
very special episodes
Yeah.
of that show.
But yeah, I agree. Wonder Years was one of my favorites. Fred Savage was my first crush as a young girl. And I went on to have a crush on a boy in grade 8 because he looked like Fred Savage. He probably was nothing like him. But the other thing that was so great about that show is it was one of the shows that did a really good job of working in the history of the time. So my parents were really eager to watch it with us and be like, oh, they're talking about this thing that was going on in the 60s, and this is how that impacted me. And, they would show actual footage of like the moon landing or the Cuban Missile Crisis or whatever it was. So it was both, you had that like, you wanted to watch the young romances and the kids, but also your parents were excited to like tell you about the history, at least mine were. So it was kind of
Well, that's cool.
a family event for us, for sure.
Well, that's cool too. I like because my thought is, if it's a period show, you have to at least do something with the period or make it interesting. Otherwise, why does it need to be a period show? And I
Yeah.
think Wonder Years is one of the shows that did it well.
Yeah, agreed.
Because it wasn't just, it's set in the past. It's set in the past, and we're going to use that.
Yep.
I like the Goldbergs, but the Goldbergs wishes it was as good as the Wonder Years because it does follow that same formula of you have a narrator and going back into time looking at life as a kid. And speaking of crushes, I mean, like, how can you not have a crush as a young kid, as a young boy on Danica McKellar?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know if she was my first crush, but she was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
So, Matt, I know you've seen this, but Beth, did you ever watch Impractical Jokers?
No.
Okay, there's one episode, you should look this up, where as one of the punishments, they make Murr, one of the guys, wear a Speedo and get oiled up, and then have an awkward interview with Danica. Is it Danica McKellar or Danica Patrick? I forget.
Danica
McKellar.
McKellar. Danica Patrick's a racer.
Yeah.
Okay. Danica McKellar. Basically, like, who was his like childhood crush. So he basically has to go in almost naked, oiled up, wearing a Speedo, and talk to his childhood crush.
That's awful.
Because he thinks he's going to be doing like a bodybuilding, like that he's going to be like showing off his body and like that's the punishment. And that's believable enough because he's this tiny little skinny guy.
Yeah.
But then he goes in there and she's just sitting there ready for him to interview. And he's like, what?
That's so
Worst way to
mean.
meet your crush.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely go back and watch and look that up. Look up Impractical Jokers, Danica McKellar.
I made a note.
Yes.
There you go. I don't remember the theme song from Wonder Years.
It's a Beatles song. Obladi,
Oh,
Oblada.
yes! I do remember it.
Yep.
Okay. It is great.
No,
as a
I
song.
take it back. Sorry. That was for the show Life Goes
Cocker.
On. The Wonder Years was
What Would You
do if I sang out of tune? Would you
Yep.
stand there and walk
Yeah.
out on me?
Isn't that also a Beatles song?
It is a Beatles song, but the version they use is Joe Cocker.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I forgot. Thank you. Yes, that is top tier. I will take a point away from it because it wasn't written for the show, but it's such a well done thing, so I'm giving it a 9.
I'll give it an 8.
I'll give it an 8.
Yeah.
All right. We're getting close to the end here. Anyone else have any other shows?
Well, I think just the kind of the genre of show. I'll kind of lump Magnum PI and the A Team into one, kind of like the same kind of genre there, of like the cool tough guy attitude. Get Tom Selleck in there and Mr. T.
And Miami
Actually.
Vice would also be.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Miami Vice would all be, or Hawaii Five-0 also.
And to a lesser extent, there's like Hill Street Blues. That wasn't so much tough guy. That was a little bit more in depth on like the side of the police officers. Whereas like those ones that you're talking about are definitely like how you're saying like, oh, I'm the macho guy. I'm going to beat him up. And Hill Street Blues is more of the drama surrounding this police precinct.
Yeah. I didn't really watch any of these shows. I know enough about them to kind of get them in the cultural aspect. So I'm not sure, Beth, did you watch these shows?
I did not. They were a little before my time, and I never had a desire to go back and watch them. Plus, I think I was intimidated by all the mustaches. I feel like the 80s were really a stage for a thick mustache. And yeah, that's just not my scene.
Which is funny because it's like it's really Magnum PI that had that, where it's like T.J. Hooker and MacGyver and A
True,
Team. Like these guys didn't have or Miami Vice. They didn't have mustaches.
true, true.
There's also the Burt Reynolds movies too.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, like 80s TV is going to reflect 80s movies. You had these action heroes from the 80s
Mhm.
movies that Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger are competing, and Jean-Claude Van Damme. They're all like doing this herbal, or I don't know what word I'm trying to say, this very masculine energy, and
Mhm.
the like, this is unbelievably masculine, but it's cool to watch as a guy.
Yeah.
one thing that I don't think we've mentioned, probably one of the biggest comedies of the '80s was Newhart, which was
Mhm.
I had that on my list.
was very much a groundbreaking show in a lot of ways, but arguably had one of the best finales of any TV show ever.
That's when he woke up in the other show. Was
Yeah,
that?
and it was all a dream.
Mhm. They spoofed that just for like a bonus feature, extra little clip. They did that with Breaking Bad. They had
And Lost.
yeah, I've lost too. But you did with Breaking Bad. They had Bryan Cranston wake up as Hal from Malcolm in the Middle with Lois from Malcolm in the Middle, saying like, "Oh, I had this crazy dream that I was a drug dealer and I killed people." And
That's clever.
yeah,
Man, obviously the success of Newhart show relies on Bob Newhart.
Oh
He
yeah,
is such a talented comedian
hmm
where he doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't need to be crazy. He has this very small, like this dry delivery
yeah.
where it like he leads you along in the joke as he delivers it, and then like you catch up to it at the end. I don't know if that's the best way to describe that. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, he has his own style of comedy, really. Um,
Yeah.
it's deadpan without being Stephen Wright. It was
Yes.
he's somehow both the comedian and the straight guy at the same time, which not
There
many
you
people
go.
do. And he's still, I heard him in an interview just, I think a couple of years ago, maybe the first year or two of the Conan podcast. He sat down with Conan and he's still very sharp, very funny. I don't know if he's still alive. I feel like
he
he
is. I
might
just
be.
looked it up. He's 93.
Wow, good on him.
So
Mhm.
actually, I just thought of this now. With the recent news that's coming out, if like Saturday Night Live or anything like that needs someone to play Rudy Giuliani, they should get Bob Newhart because they look so much similar.
They actually do.
I couldn't buy Newhart as Giuliani though, because like you need a bigger personality for that. And even though Newhart is a big star, he
Yeah.
doesn't have a big personality, and that's what works so well. Is he's like this? He's not a sad sack sort of person, but he almost plays to that
Yeah.
hmm
and lets him be like that self-deprecating sort
Yeah.
of humor. He's so good. I love
Yeah,
Bob.
and he had a great recurring role on The Big Bang Theory, and
Mhm.
they kept bringing him back because he was brilliant on that show.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a great pick. That was one of the last ones I had on here, but we didn't talk about a show that maybe we haven't seen too much because there's a lot of really good '80s shows, but we didn't talk about Family Ties.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I wanted to bring up that show. Like I said, it's not something I've watched a lot, but I mean that was like the Michael J. Fox vehicle, and we
hmm
got so much great um, film and TV out of Michael J. Fox. That's like thank you for Family Ties that propelled him into the limelight.
oh, Michael J. Fox, Courtney Cox, who really was in, there was a season or two, I think she was in. Um, that show, I was allowed to watch that show because it didn't have as grown up themes apparently. But yeah, I agree. Michael J. Fox was probably the best character on that show. Um, just to have, first of all, a super conservative character there who was super into politics, and he was very much his young Republican identity. Um, and he wasn't that typical teenager who was just running around going to parties and doing that. I think that's what set him apart a little bit. But it was a great family. I think when I think of that show now, you think about some of the the hardships that maybe some of the girls went through in their real lives. And, I know they struggled in that whole child actor trajectory. But I love the show, love the theme, love the opening. I thought it was a great show.
Actually, now I'm wondering, it might have been Family Ties that Matthew Perry died in, or Growing Pains. It was one of the two.
I think it was Family Ties, because I think that sounds familiar.
Honestly, I'm trying to think of Family Ties. I know I watched a little bit on Nick at Night, but I keep getting them mixed.
No, it was Growing Pains. You're right. It was Growing Pains.
I keep getting those two mixed up. And all I really know is the dad and Michael J. Fox. I forget the dad's name in real life. Those are the two actors I can clearly pick out as Family Ties. But those shows are almost interchangeable for me.
Justine Bateman and Tina Yothers were the two sisters. Courtney
Was it
Cox,
Joanna Kearns? Was it the mom?
I think she was the mom, and the dad, I can see his face and I can't think of his name.
Yeah, he was Ted's dad on How I Met Your Mother.
Yes.
Yes.
He was. And then also the Matthew Perry died as a DUI. He was drunk driving and got in an accident and died.
Okay. Still kind of rings true to his personal life.
Yeah. I mean, any sort of substance abuse, that's going to tie right into it. The other TV show that gets talked about, actually there's a couple of them. There's both Charles in Charge and Who's the Boss.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are other big 80s shows that get brought up a lot when we talk about those shows. Again, I haven't seen these shows. I wish I was better prepared. I wish I had like all this stuff to be like, oh yeah, but nope.
Matt, we don't expect you to watch all of 80s TV just for this episode.
I'm watching all of 90s TV. I'm getting it all in for next one.
We don't even have a guest for 90s yet.
Oh, we will get a guest. I will be my own guest.
That'll be the easiest one to get because that's anyone our age. But yeah, anyways. I think also add to that list would also be Facts of Life. Again, another one that I haven't really seen much of.
Yeah.
So do you remember any of these shows, Beth? Like I said, Who's the Boss, Charles in Charge, Facts of Life?
Yes. So I watched all three. Charles in Charge was probably more recent of the three, so that was probably the one I enjoyed the most. The others were more like things I would catch in reruns. They were fine. I know Who's the Boss was another, like when you talk about crushes growing up, everybody had a crush on Alyssa Milano from Who's the Boss. And again, it had that whole will they, won't they with Tony and the mom, whose name is escaping me. But yeah, I could take them or leave them. It's not something I'd ever go back and rewatch for sure.
One thing that is interesting is, so Lisa Whelchel, who was one of the actresses on Facts of Life, actually went on to be a Survivor contestant in it was in the mid-20s, and she actually made it pretty far. She was in like the final 4, final 3 or something like that she made it pretty far. But and it was kind of thing where like she didn't want to play up who she was, but a couple, like at least one of the other guys who was closer to her age, basically was like, yeah, I grew up watching the show. I know who you are.
Huh, I did not.
We should have like a bingo card that we put on our site, and that like you get a point for every time we mention Lost, Survivor, Muppets, or what's the other show that we talk? The Office, I guess,
or Back to the Future for you.
Back to the Future, because like we come back to these wells like all the time. Like I know this doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but remember that time on Lost when this happened? Me too. All right, continue on.
Yeah.
You're welcome, everyone.
I had to specifically not ask Jeff about Muppets Mayhem because I know he's a Muppets guy, because I knew that would be a very long diatribe.
We can maybe talk about Muppets Mayhem if you feel like that warrants a whole episode, but
I could definitely talk about it for a whole episode, but it depends on if we need to.
Well, does anyone really need our episodes, period? I know we have a couple people like on life support. It's like this is the only thing keeping them going, but for the rest of you guys, it's just a hobby. Yeah. All right, any other shows from the 80s?
Well, we briefly mentioned it, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was one of the I mean, I was definitely not okay, here's another bingo card. I was definitely not as into that as I was Power Rangers, but I mean, I still got into it enough. And like I had one of my cousins, actually Tammy's brother, who was actually on this podcast, he was a huge and had all the action figures, so I actually got into it through him. Because he's like a few years older than me. But yeah, I mean, just the different personalities and just the fact that it's like it's not just a superhero, but they're teenage superheroes who talk cool and eat pizza. It's like, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was huge in our house. My little brother was a big Turtles fan, and of course, when they started making the live action movies, and then I remember getting on pay per view the Coming Out of Our Shells tour, which was the live action concert that the Turtles put on. So we have the soundtrack to that playing in our house
Mhm.
at all times. Turtles were like all of the birthday parties for my brother were Turtles. Like it was
Yeah.
Turtles were huge in our house.
Does your brother still write songs?
He does. He does. He actually wrote one recently. He is in the rock band in the military, in the Air
Oh,
Force.
okay.
And not only did he, and I'll tell you about it later, he wrote a song recently, a parody that he delivered in a presentation at work. For my wedding a couple of years ago, in his wedding speech, he actually used the lyrics from a lot of the late 80s cartoons and TV shows and like made his speech with 80s theme song lyrics. It was very, very clever. I'll have to find it and show it to you one day. But
Yeah, you have to show it. Because think of this. I knew your brother briefly back when you guys were youth leaders. He came with you a few times. Like 20 years later, I still remember every word to his kangaroo song.
that's impressive.
Yeah, it's like lodged in there.
I'll have
Well, as we're wrapping up here about animated shows, I just wanted to state my discontent about the 1980s being the time they introduced on Scooby Doo. They introduced a character named Scrappy Doo in 1979, and was really trying to push for him through much of the 80s. And it's like, come on. Scooby Doo was fine without this little punk kid that you got. So that's my anger that the '80s gave us freaking Scrappy Doo. When you don't mess with perfection, Hanna Barbera. You don't do it.
Without Scrappy Doo, we wouldn't have the Scooby Doo movie, though.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that because I'm curious how it's going to hold up now versus how it was. I remember being a little disappointed back then because I was just like, "What is this?" But that's James Gunn's sense of humor. So
Here's the thing: if you go into those live-action Scooby Doo movies with an objective eye, they're not going to hold up. But if you go in deciding, "Hey, I'm going to like this," then you're going to like it.
you got a point there. I can't really argue with that.
Yeah. Okay. This isn't TV, but I think it's relative because it is rehashing from the '80s. Okay. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but Fall Out Boy came out with a new updated version of "We Didn't Start the Fire" with new current events that have happened since the original song came out, and it's actually really good. Have you heard it?
no, but I feel like it's going to make me feel old.
Yeah. Because they mentioned everything from Y2K to George Floyd and everything in between.
Wow.
That's quite the gamut. So let's move on to trivia. Brian, what do you got for trivia?
So one of the characters we talked about last week was Saeed from Lost, and we asked why did Saeed from Lost have long fingernails, and it's because the actor who played Saeed, Naveen Andrews, had long fingernails so that he could use them as guitar picks while playing guitar between scenes.
Sounds good. What interesting trivia that we had last week. Great. Well, anyway, this week we talked about Eureka's Castle, and if Jim Henson is the force behind Fraggle Rock, there's a person who is that version behind Eureka's Castle. So who developed the characters of Eureka's Castle? And I'll give you a hint. They are the author of a popular book series. You will know the person once I bring it up. So I'm going to just real quick check that for sure. Okay, I am right on that. Perfect. All right. So every now and then I just lead off and I'm like, wait, is that right? But I am. Well, anyway, special thanks to our guest who, second time coming back and just as great as the first time. We will see you the next time then, Beth. Next time that you're on, and we'll make sure our internet's better, right?
Lovely to see you guys.
All right. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Beth.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.